So I'm all packed up and ready to go here. I've only got 1.5 bottles of water, so I got to be conservative with my water today. But before I take off, I wanted to tell you a little bit about my bicycle. Now, some of you may already know about this bike. I've had this bike for about 3.5 years, 3 years, something like that. And it's an amazing bicycle. It's a touring bicycle made by a company called Co-Motion Cycles. They're located in Eugene, Oregon, and I've been riding a Co-Motion Cycles bicycle for the last almost 10 years now, since 2012. So I love these bikes. This is my second Co-Motion bicycle, and this bike is unique because it's oriented a little bit more towards road cycling than my older Co-Motion bicycle, which was oriented a little bit more towards off-road touring. But this bike has an internal gearbox called a Pinion Gearbox, and it's down here. It's kind of hard to see, but basically all of the gears for this bike are located within this box, and there are 18 gears in total, and there are a bunch of low gears which help me out a lot to help me go up these hills while carrying a bunch of weight on my bicycle. So the advantage to this is that I never have to adjust any of the derailleurs that you would find on a traditional bicycle. There is no metal chain on my bike which squeaks and you have to clean on a regular basis. Instead, there's this carbon fiber belt, and basically this bike is maintenance free. In the 3 years I've owned this bike, I've basically done nothing to it. I've never had a flat tire. The only thing you have to do is wipe this belt down every once in a while, just like squirt it with water and wipe it with a towel. And you have to change the oil inside this gearbox about once a year. Other than that, there's basically been nothing that I've had to do with this bike, which when you're bicycle touring is great because I hate doing maintenance on my bicycle, especially when I'm out on the road. This bike also has these Sns Couplers. There's one right here and there's one down here, and these are basically attachments that allow me to split the frame of my bicycle in half, and this whole bike can fold up and fit inside an airline-friendly suitcase or travel case. So that basically I can fly with this bicycle anywhere in the world, and I don't have to pay an extra bicycle fee to fly with my bike because the bike fits inside of a regular suitcase. It's an amazing bike. I've also got 2 kickstands on this bicycle, one on the back, which is just a regular old kickstand, and then I've got one on the front, which helps the weight. Because I'm carrying all this weight on my bike, it prevents that front wheel from turning over. And I sell these kickstands on my website if you want to get one, bicycletouringpro.com/shop, or you can go to biketourshop.com and just do a quick search there for the front kickstand. You'll find it in my shop. It's definitely worth the money. It's very lightweight, so it adds hardly anything to the overall weight of your bicycle, and it makes parking your bike a total breeze, something that I really enjoy. So anyways, that's a little bit about my bike that I'm riding out here. This bike, like I said, is oriented more towards road cycling, which I'm kind of doing a mix of road and off-road on this trip. So this bike doesn't handle very well on off-road scenarios, although it can do it, obviously, because you're seeing me do it. But it's really designed more as a road-centric sort of touring bicycle with the capability of doing some off-road touring. So today is going to be largely off-road, and then tomorrow I'll be back on a paved road again. So as you can see, kind of a mix of things. Tonight, once we get to our campsite, I want to tell you about my very first bicycle that I used on my bike tours, because it was a very different bike than the one you see here. But it's getting late in the day, it's time to go, and I think we should hit the road. So, adios! Look at the view over here to my left. This is amazing. I was talking earlier about my bicycle and how it's designed mostly for on-road riding, you know, paved road riding. But on this kind of stuff where it's compact dirt or gravel, this touring bike does fine. It's great. I'm cruising here. 10 miles an hour in the dirt. Not bad. Uphill. Uphill. Slight uphill. It's about to get steeper though. I stopped here for a moment because there's a fork in the road. If you can see this is 146 and this is the way I think I'm supposed to go, but this is uphill, way uphill, and this is downhill, way downhill. So I always like to check the map before I head on a big uphill to make sure I'm going the right way, because there's nothing worse than getting to the top of that hill and then realizing you were supposed to go downhill at that fork. So I'm just checking the map to make sure, and then I'll continue on my way. But yeah, pretty sure I'm going up, darn it. So that's the direction I've come from, that way. And I'm going up there, around this mountain and down to the right, not to the left. I'm not going this way. But it looks amazing over there, and I'm gonna have to come back here another time and see what's over there. I know there's a river or something down there. Have to go explore that. Oh yeah. I've reached a somewhat flat spot. Still going uphill, but a little flatter than it was. I don't mind going uphill so much when there's no cars and the view is like that. How can you complain too much? You know? I mean, you can complain, I can complain. I can complain about this hill all day. But the view is great. Whew, it's getting rocky. Almost sunset. Go, Darren, go. Go, Darren, go. I'm going 2 miles, 3 miles an hour. Just made it to the top, and I just looked at my phone. I just crossed over 10,000 feet in elevation. So I'm at like 10,050 feet right now. It's gotta be pretty high up. Pretty high up. Yeah. Considering I started at like 6,500 feet. So now that I've reached the top, I think that pretty much all my big climbing for the day is done now. I have a big downhill, and there's a reservoir about 7 or 8 miles down, and I'm hoping that it has water in it. I'm not sure if it's a reservoir or a lake, but something like that. So here we go, downhill now. I made an old man. I said, tell me your story. He took out a notepad and wrote something for me. He kept walking on down the road, and I watched him disappear like smoke. And I thought I'd just seen a ghost. Then I looked down at what he wrote. It said, son, when you grow up you'll be fine. This road is amazing. When the road smooths out and it's downhill, oh yeah. Beautiful view.
Stop looking for the answers, and you'll find what you've got. I met a young man searching for glory. I took out an old pen, wrote in my story. Then I kept walking on down the road. When the time is up, it's time to go. I pray he reads what's on the note. It takes to heart what I wrote. I said, son, when you grow up, you'll be fine. I know you've got questions on your mind. Life is gonna happen one way or the other, whether you like it or not. Stop looking for the answers, and you'll find what you've got. When you grow up, you'll be fine. I know you've got questions on your mind. Life is gonna happen one way or the other, whether you like it or not. Stop looking for the answers, and you'll find what you've got.
Check it out. Oh. Yep. This is going to be my home for tonight. So I made it to the lake, which is literally just like right behind me here. And you have to pay to camp there, and I don't want to pay. So I drive like 200 yards down the road, and I can camp here for free. And the creek is right here, so I have enough running water for the whole night and morning and everything. So perfect spot. The only downside is the road is right there, but it's okay. So before I set up my tent and everything, I promised to tell you a story about my first bicycle, because this Co-Motion Siskiyou touring bicycle is an expensive bike that not a lot of people would go out and purchase right away. And I certainly didn't go out and buy a bike like this when I first started bicycle touring. I slowly built my way up. So my first bicycle was a, what was it? It was a Sierra Schwinn, a Schwinn bicycle. And it was really a mountain bike, a hardtail mountain bike from like the late 1980s, I believe, maybe early 1990s, I'm not sure. But it was 2001 when I did my first bike tour, and I was 17 years old at the time, and I needed a bike so that I could do this trip that I wanted to do from Oregon to Mexico down the California coastline. And at 17 years old, I had about $300 to my name. So going out to buy a bicycle was basically not an option, because I wouldn't have any money left over to do the trip that I wanted to do. So I ended up using my dad's old mountain bike, which was in the garage. It was the Sierra Schwinn. So I ended up using this old Sierra Schwinn mountain bike that was in the garage. And it was my dad's, and I'd never seen him ride this bike, like practically ever. In large part because my dad had a stroke when I was 5 years old. And so basically from the time I was 5 until now, my dad has suffered with, balance issues and stuff like that. So riding a bike is very, very hard for him. So he had a bike at some point, and he just never rode it because of this stroke. So anyways, I take his old bicycle. He says, you're welcome to use my bike on your trip. So I take my dad's old bike and I repair it as best I can. And I get it ready for this bike tour. And I proceed to ride that old 20-year-old bicycle down the coast from Oregon to Mexico. And one of the things, because I was such a cheapskate and because I had no money, I didn't replace the brake pads. So at the middle of my trip, the brake pads were like completely worn out because they were 20 years old, and I had basically no way to stop. So from basically like San Francisco all the way down to Mexico, I had no brakes on this bike, and I was using my feet to stop the bicycle. And if you look at the photos from my early bike tour, you'll see that my feet have a bunch of duct tape on them. My shoes are all duct taped up, and that's because I burnt holes through the bottom of my shoes, and then my cheap solution was just to keep duct taping these shoes over and over and over again until I got to the Mexican border. So by the time I got to Mexico, I had 2 massive holes in my shoes, which were basically kept together with duct tape. So that was my first touring bicycle, and to make the story even worse, at the very end of my bike tour, I reached the Mexican border. I'm like, woohoo, I did it, I'm the king of the world. You know, I reached the Mexican border, and my aunt and uncle come in their van. They lived in nearby San Diego, so they come to pick me up at the border. And my aunt had like a Volkswagen Vanagon, and with a bike rack that's on the front of the van. So we load my bike onto the front of the van, and then my aunt is driving me back to her house. And on the way there, like, again, I've just completed this 1,000-mile bike tour down the California coastline. On the way back to my aunt's house, she is approaching a signal, an intersection, a big intersection. And the light turns red, and it's one of those scenarios where you don't know, like, should I slam on the brakes really hard, or should I gun it and go through the signal? You know what I mean? So my aunt decides to gun it and go through the signal, forgetting that my bicycle is on the front rack of her car. So she guns it, she hits a dip in the intersection, my bike like hits the pavement, gets sucked underneath the van, she runs over my bicycle, it's in 1,000 pieces in the middle of the intersection. You know, my water bottles sprayed off, parts of the bike broke off, the wheels all bent and everything, and I go from like an ecstatic high of I just completed like this amazing bike tour, one of the best and most amazing things I'll ever do in my life, all the way down to like a low, because I had become so attached to that bicycle, you know, that it's like my best friend. So here I am celebrating one moment and like crying. I wasn't crying, but I was like pretty upset the next moment, and picking up, you know, 100 pieces of this bike in the middle of this crowded San Diego intersection. So that's how my bike tour, my very first bike tour, ended, on a high note and on a low note, all at the same time. And then the next year, I wanted to ride my bicycle across America from east to west on the Trans-America bike route, trail or whatever. And again, I was 18 years old. I had just started college, so I have even less money now. But I want to do this like epic cross-country bike ride. So I decide that I'm going to use my dad's old bike again, even though it's been run over by a car and like the wheel is like bent at an angle. So I pay for new wheels to be put on this thing. The frame of the bike is like crooked like this, and I just take a hammer to it and hammer it out as straight as I possibly can. I put some new brake pads on, and then I ride that thing all the way across America. So that was my first touring bicycle that I used, and honestly, I was able to do the trip on that bike, although I would have had an easier time had I been using a different, you know, higher quality, better actual touring bicycle. So the whole point of this whole story is you got to start out with what you got sometimes. You know, you don't have to go out and buy a $8,000 touring bicycle like you see here. You can start out with what you have oftentimes and then slowly build up. And that's exactly what I've done over the last 21 years is I started with my dad's old bike, and then the following year, my third year of cycling, I rode my bike from North Carolina to Maine up the east coast of the United States. And I decided at that time that it was finally time to go out and get a proper touring bicycle. So I bought the cheapest touring bicycle that I could possibly find. It was the Fuji Touring. And I think at the time it cost about $800, maybe $750, something like that. Although that bike now is probably $1,200, $1,300, something. So prices go up over the years, you know. But anyways, at the time it was like $750. So most amount of money I've spent on anything in my entire life up to that point. Bought that thing and rode it up the East Coast, and man, it made a difference having a proper touring bicycle. And then the next year I rode from, where did I ride? From Chicago down to New Orleans. And that year, instead of buying a new bike, I used my Fuji touring bike, but then I went out and bought some new panniers, because I had been using used panniers that my uncle had given to me, and they had holes in them and they weren't waterproof and they smelled bad. And so then I went out and bought panniers for that 4th trip. Then my 5th year I cycled on the west coast of the United States again, going basically from British Columbia, Canada, down to like the California-Oregon border. And again, I bought like a new sleeping bag and a new tent that year. So as you can see, like over time, I slowly acquired more and more stuff that I needed for bicycle touring. I never went out and bought like everything all at once. I did one trip with what I had. Then the next year I used what I had again, but I bought like one thing. And then the next year I used what I had again, but I bought one more new thing. And I just did that over and over and over again until I have the setup that I have now, which, you know, I've got one of the best touring bicycles in the world. I have the best, most waterproof panniers in the whole world. I've got a lightweight tent and lightweight sleeping bag and lightweight sleeping pad and all these various things that there's no way I could have afforded all this stuff when I first started bike touring at age 17. So if you're in this situation where like you would like to go bicycle touring, but you don't have $10,000 to drop on a setup like I've got here, don't worry, you don't have to do that. You can use what you got. You know, if you're into backpacking, hiking, outdoors stuff in general, you probably already have a lot of the stuff that you need to go bicycle touring. You know, you probably have a tent, you probably have a sleeping bag, you might have a sleeping mat, you might have a cook stove, and cook pot, you know, utensils, clothing. The clothing that you wear for hiking is very similar to what, you know, you see me wearing for biking. So don't fret if you can't yet afford a bike or gear like this. Use what you got and then slowly build up. All right, guys, that's it. I'm Darren Alff from BicycleTouringPro.com. Thank you so much for watching. Before I set up my tent here and everything, I just want to thank each and every one of my Bicycle Touring Pro patrons. Without your support, these videos would not be possible. I put a lot of wear and tear on my cameras and microphones and tripods and all of the gear that I use to produce these videos, so I kind of have to repair and replace them quite often. So it is your donations that really allow me to continue to make these videos. So thank you, thank you, thank you. If you are ready to conduct your own bicycle touring adventures like you've seen me do in this video or in my hundreds of other videos here on the Bicycle Touring Pro YouTube channel, make sure you head on over to my website, BicycleTouringPro.com, and sign up for my free email newsletter. This newsletter will teach you the basics of how to conduct a long-distance bike tour anywhere in the world. And if you're ready for a deep dive into everything that you need to know in order to conduct your own bicycle tours anywhere in the world, make sure you pick up a copy of my 400-page guide, The Bicycle Touring Blueprint. This is my book that has taught thousands of people all around the world how to conduct their own self-supported bicycle touring adventures. So if you're serious about conducting a bike tour of your own, I highly recommend you pick up a copy of this book and start reading it today. It's available in ebook and paperback format, so you can read it on your computer, your tablet, or you can have it shipped to your home as a regular paperback. I prefer the paperback, honestly. I think it's better because there are some sections of the book that you're going to want to write in and take notes in, but either format is perfectly fine. All right, guys, that's it. I'm Darren Alff from BicycleTouringPro.com. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you out on the road sometime soon. Bye.